Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. Here's the president of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, John Denuzzo.
Welcome to Lake George Battlefield Moments. I'm John Denuzzo, the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance Board of Trustees. A guest this week is Gina Mintzer, the Executive Director of the Lake George Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Gina.
Glad to be here, John.
I almost said Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. You could have that job, too, if you like.
No, that's okay. I love my job.
Okay. Well, one of the ones, Gina and I were just speaking together. I have a daughter who lives in Florida, and Gina's originally from Florida. And so, Gina, as someone who didn't come to the area until adulthood, what's your experience in coming to appreciate the history of Lake George?
Well, for me personally, when I moved to upstate New York in the late 80s, I lived in Amsterdam, New York, and visited the Aurisville Shrine, which is the national shrine of the North American martyrs, our shrine of Our Lady of Martyrs. And that's where they were actually martyred at the Mohawk Indian Village in 1642 and 1646. And that included St. Isaac Jogues and known for Blessed Kateri Tekakwitha. When I came to work here in Lake George in 2017, and then I met with folks at the Battlefield Park Alliance, and I could really understand the path of the martyrs from, Amsterdam, specifically St. Isaac Jogues, here to Lake George. And what a path.
Oh, wonderful. So you came from Florida. We have guests all the time come from all over the world, literally, to Lake George Battlefield Park to experience our history, Fort William Henry's, and so forth. Well, what do you see as a tourism professional in terms of the historical interests of tourists from different areas, say a Canadian versus a Floridian or other things?
Well, remember, Lake George wasn't just a destination. It helped to invent the idea of vacationing in nature. And yet we have a variety of people that come here to learn about history, our school groups, our historians, history enthusiasts, and especially the Canadians, as you mentioned, because this is their history, the French and Indian War. It's a part of their personal culture and history. And, we have more people than you would ever think of that sign up for the walking tours. Whether it's with Fort William Henry or even to hear the historical narratives that introduce people to our history while they're on the Lake George Steamboat Company. So we're introducing that history to people every day in some way, shape, or form and telling our story.
Yeah, and as someone who is not a tourism professional, I often wonder, the challenges that we face in certainly getting an audience. And fortunately, we're growing immensely in numbers in terms of the number of people who visit the park, our visitor center, and so forth. But the young people, number one, and certainly those with a certain detachment to cultural, they're here for the loud events as opposed to thinking more about the unique culture that we have here in the region. So I guess, the question I have for someone like you is, our history is everywhere around us, on the lake, in the lake, and so forth. Are conservation and historic preservation historically linked?
Yes, absolutely. Sustainability and preservation are central to modern travel and history conversations every day. And one thing I mentioned earlier was, the traditions, generation after generation has come here. So many times our kids are learning this history because of the grandparents that they're traveling here with, who want to take them to certain, Diamond Island or something on a boat and learn more about the history because of information that we're able to present to them because we have preserved it. Everything that you've done in Battlefield Park alone, or the restoration of those beautiful bronze sculptures, that's helping people to see that history come alive. But right now, as you know, the submerged heritage preserve at the bottom of Lake George includes the oldest intact warship in North America, and then the 7 bateaux that are near Weowaka. Again, some of those are talked about when you're just on the Lake George Steamboat Company, when you're not even a history enthusiast or somebody who's come here to physically study that. Again, that preservation with our sustainability is here for generations to come.
Oh, that's well said. So, frankly, we Lake George compete with Saratoga, and certainly I think iconic tourist destinations, whether they're large cities like Boston, Philadelphia, and so forth, or the more regional history-oriented organizations, places like Gettysburg or Monmouth, New Jersey, places like that. How do we distinguish ourselves from there to get on the equal playing field or maybe a higher playing field? Why would people choose Lake George versus Gettysburg or another place?
Yeah, I guess in the tourism industry, we don't look at it as competing with them. Oftentimes, folks that are at the Saratoga battlefield are telling them about other historic sites because people will say, well, what else can I see while I'm in this region? So maybe not the average person going to Gettysburg is going to be told about Lake George, but as people study, we're a piece of that longer ramp of history. People started here before the Revolution. And so they've already been coming here or learning about history, and we're a piece of that. So I don't really believe, that it's a competition. We've expanded the pie, so to speak, of telling our stories together. And we're going to see that over this whole year of celebrating the 250th. As people learn something in Saratoga or in Albany or downstate or vice versa, they're going to learn it up here and say, oh, I need to go to Grant's Cottage, right down the road. And then maybe I might go to the Battlefield Park in Saratoga because I'm on this path.
Cool. Okay. As we try to sustain and grow our community here at Lake George, what is it that attracts people to become residents? You said familiarization as having been tourists and things like that. But in terms of wanting to be a permanent part of this, how do we do that? How do we get jobs, permanent jobs, not in the necessarily the tourism related businesses, but more substantial, technology and such? How do we get those people interested in coming? Does history play a role in that? History
plays a role in that, but it's also awareness of the people that are already here. I know that when we're talking with companies that are recruiting, let's just say a Glens Falls Hospital or Angiodynamics or someone that is recruiting, part of that is the quality of life. And the quality of life here is the history of the livelihood of people who've settled here or who began here and have grown their businesses here. We have many businesses that are over 100 years old. I talk about the Lake George Steamboat Company, and then when you think about the owners of that and Mr. Dow, who has many patents, that history is our history. And that makes people even more community oriented, like they're in the know. So people want to be and live in a place that they're in the know and that they're a part of something that's historic and with the sustainability and the future of generations to come.
Okay, interesting. Now, we talked a lot about history and we talked a lot about your business of tourism, but how do you think should tourism organizations like yours and at the state level support historic preservation and awareness?
Well, it comes first and foremost of knowing who is in this industry and who needs help and what sort of support do they need. It could be anything from us as a board of directors sending a letter of support as somebody's going after grant money for the state or preservation money. Recently, we worked with the Adirondack Folk School, who's telling a different kind of history story right here that goes back to our Native American roots. They were able to get a statewide grant to winterize their facilities so that we could teach classes year round. So we were just a part of a little bit. A $68,000 grant is a big deal. And just like the DRI that we've all worked on here, a part of that is going toward what we're going to see now at Battlefield Park. And again, preserving that history. So it's understanding what the needs are and then where could those monies be? That's one piece. But then the awareness. First and foremost, when people come and visit here, do they know about the Battlefield Park Interpretive Center? Do they know everything that they could do at the fort? Or do they know about that they could take a class at the Adirondack Folk School that weaves in our historical narratives in all of what they're doing? Or they just learn more about the people that live here because they've come into the Village Information Center to learn more about what can I do while I'm here with my grandparents and with my grandchildren. And everyone in between.
Fabulous. And I would say you mentioned the visitor center that's operated by the chamber in the village. We have given you thousands of brochures of the walking tour, and they go like hotcakes. It's amazing just how. And again, you don't have to be immersed in loving history. You just kind of, oh, this is interesting. This along the lake here is where there was a colonial dock in 1758. Things like that. Let me ask you a personal question as we wrap up here. You have seen Lake George with fresh eyes. You see Lake George's history as both a business professional and as a consumer. what historic sites, doesn't have to be the Battlefield Park, Fort William Henry, any other place specifically, what historic sites in our area mean the most to you in terms of, astonishingly saying, wow, I can imagine what this was all about, 1700, 1800, whatever you say?
So when I have friends that come here that have never been here, I take them first on a boat cruise. Could be a steamboat. It could be the former Adirondack, future Horicon, or maybe they're staying up north and we get on the Morgan because that begins, you're kind of dipping your toes in that history. And then I always take people to the fort. We start there and then we go to Fort Ticonderoga. And then if I really know that, wow, they're history enthusiasts, then I'm like, oh, we have to go to Grant Cottage. I think I think they have awesome docents there. And then there's a piece, I don't know, John, if you've been up there, and it may not be considered a historic site, but Natural Stone Bridge and Caves, to be able to walk through there and see not only the caves, so you understand the rock, the fortress that we have here because of our natural elements. That's a really beautiful thing. And to understand our snow history and flooding and those kinds of things that happen here, it's a part of our history. And to know that the Native American culture, folks that were here, had to go through all of that. They were making that, that passage from Orisville to here, St. Isaac Jogues. They weren't driving a Camry like me.
Right.
So I like to show off that as well as all of our natural beauty in that way, because we, living here now as residents, continue to maintain the natural beauty with all of that we put into it and preserve so that we can continue to tell the story of our history. So that's how I begin it. And I like seeing others to see it through not only my eyes, but then I get to see it through theirs as I help to tell the story.
Well, you're a terrific ambassador for the community, Gina. I really mean that. Any final thoughts before we break?
Well, I just like to say, the story of Lake George doesn't begin with forts. It began thousands of years earlier. Tourists have been enjoying our history as something to do. We know that visiting the Fort William Henry, Fort Ticonderoga, Battlefield Park, Interpretive Center, walking tours and more. And then they learn and realize it's their own history. And that gives me great joy to be a part of that.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, we always, of course, remind people our website is lakegeorgebattlefield.org. What's the chambers for people coming to Lake George? What do you suggest they go to find things to do?
LakeGeorgeChamber.com.
Fantastic. Gina Mintzer, thank you very much for being a part of our history.
Glad to be here.
Our Battlefield Park Alliance program will be back again next week at this time and in this place. Thank you for being a part of our history, folks.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more information or to check out the latest podcast, go to lakegeorgebattlefield.org and listen live on Saturday mornings to Lake George Battlefield Moments on 93.5 Lake FM.